Great. Hello and good morning. My name's Amanda. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator at the Missouri Poison Center. And with me today is our Managing Director, Julie Weber, who's also a pharmacist and specialist in poison information. We're going to talk today mostly about snakes. I know it's not everyone's favorite topic, but it is something that we're seeing more and more bites coming, uh, calls regarding snake bites given the weather and the temperatures. So, a little bit of background: snakes are, of course, reptiles that include lizards, crocodiles, and turtles. And about half of our snakes lay eggs and half give birth to actually developed young. And as they grow, snakes shed their outer skin 3 to 5 times a year. And really surprisingly is that all snakes can swim and all snakes can eat other animals and are classified mostly as carnivores. And so they do play an important role in controlling our rodent population. They also serve as a food source to other wildlife, such as hawks, owls, skunks, minks, and herons. And in Missouri, we have 49 species of snakes and subspecies of snakes. And most of our snakes are actually, but today we're going to talk about some of the venomous snakes that we have in Missouri and talk through some of the snake bite information as well. So I first wanted just to get us started by looking at this picture. This is some woods, could be anywhere in Missouri you can imagine. I want you to look closely and know that there are 5 snakes in this picture. And maybe you can see a few of them just with a quick look, but others are very hidden. In fact, it took me a long time to find the 5th one, and they are very camouflaged. So let's look at where they are on the next slide. Hopefully you found some of them as well. I think that 5th one kind of off to the right is a really hard find. So this is just to show that it can be very difficult to spot them in nature, but it is something that they use as their defense mechanism. So I'm going to pass it off to Julie, who's going to talk through some of our venomous snakes.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. Boy, it is something how those snakes hide, and it's really also as some way to protect themselves, and they don't want to see us as much as some of us don't want to see them. So let's start with the venomous snakes here. And all venomous snakes native to Missouri are members of what we call the pit viper family. And you think about it, pit vipers have a very characteristic pit located between the eye and the nostril, as you see in the picture right here. It's going to be on each side of their head, and this detects body heat of small animals or birds. They also have a pair of fangs, which we most is notorious about snakes. We think about their fangs. And the pupils of the venomous snake are really more elliptical shape. They often appear like vertical slits in the iris, or that's in the center part of the eye. Now, not that we want to get this close, but we do have people that capture the snakes and bring them in for identification. I always recommend staying back. Pictures work great and can be utilized to help us identify them. The single row of scales underneath the tail, as you can see here, is another indication of a venomous snake. So, venomous snakes that we see here in Missouri are going to include the eastern copperhead, the northern cottonmouth, the timber rattlesnake, the prairie Massasauga, the western pygmy rattlesnake, and the eastern Massasauga. Now, something about the eastern Massasauga we'll get into a little bit, but they're almost really endangered or extinct here in Missouri. We don't see a lot. We're going to go over all of those in a little bit. Now, for the non-venomous snakes, they have round pupils, and I really have utilized this being out on a hike or seeing a snake on the roadside, staying back enough, but sometimes they are very close right there, and that round pupil you can see pretty quickly, and that helps to know it's a non-venomous snake. It's also helpful looking at the bottom part of it where you can see underneath the tail that double row of scales versus the single that's in the venomous snake. Now, something I used to utilize a lot when asking callers on the hotline about if they had a venomous or non-venomous snake when they saw it was like comparing the shape of the head, that triangle shaped head. And that really doesn't necessarily mean danger. So something that we've really gotten away from too, because what you think about, there are several harmless species like water snakes, garter snakes, or hognose snakes that can actually flatten their heads and they appear triangular. And I have been tricked by those. So you have to really be careful to use that as a feature. I really look for those fangs versus in that non-venomous snake, you see more teeth marks. Alrighty. Now what we're going to go over is the Eastern Copperhead snake. And this is really a medium-sized snake. It gets at about 2 to 3 feet in length, which I think that's plenty long, but they're still bigger. It's really, you can tell by the gray kind of copper tan or pinkish tan hourglass bands that are dark brown. And a great way you look at that dark brown, they look like Hershey's Kisses, and that can help identify this copperhead. The Eastern Copperhead is actually the most common venomous snake in Missouri, and really one of our top calls into the Poison Center during the spring, summer, and fall time when we start getting our snake calls. Now, the copperhead venom is considered mild compared to that of other venomous snakes. And even the copperheads, I always say in Missouri, are just not as harmful as copperheads seen in other states. So there is a variation between species and even within the different states of how significant the results of the envenomation can be from the copperhead. Now, medical treatment, no matter what, when we do have fangs that are identified in the bite, we do recommend that a person does seek medical attention. It's not always safe to watch that at home. If we can, we try, but we have to be careful. Now, what I think is really cool about this, and I remember this so distinctly, when I first started at the Poison Center on the hotline, someone actually brought the snake to the emergency department. And trust me, we do not recommend bringing the snake, even getting close to the snake, because you too would have a risk beyond the person who was bit to be bitten. But with the copperhead, the baby one, you can see here in this picture, its tail gets like a yellow-green color to help identify it. And that's really prominent on the younger snakes. You don't see that on the older snakes that are bigger. But it helped me in that instance where, unfortunately, I don't love snakes. My husband has tried to get me to really like them as much as he do, but I just don't. I did get the fortunate opportunity, though, to identify one. And so it was in a jar. And just, again, don't bring snakes into the hospital. If we do recommend you go in, and don't really chop their heads off or kill them. Just try to help. If you do see a feature, snap a picture, get away. Now, where is the copperhead found? It's throughout the state. It's really not noted, though, at the extreme northern border of Iowa. So the Osage copperhead, which I think I see a lot being around lakes and areas, it's really occurs in the northern 2/3 of the state, and it's replaced by the southern copperhead subspecies in the southern third. Okay, our northern cottonmouth. And when you look at this, see how dark it is and everything. And when I think of cottonmouth, I immediately think about the word water moccasin. That's where we commonly know them and see them in the waters. It's a heavily bodied, real dark, kind of olive brown to really, it looks black to me. And it usually gets 3 to 4 feet in length. Now, the head is noticeably wider than the neck, and the top of the head is dark brown or black. Now, the cottonmouth that I commonly call it is, we think about it, it's that whitish lining in the mouth. And when the snake gets alarmed, a cottonmouth typically opens its mouth real wide as a defensive posture, showing the cotton white lining. Now, the bite of the northern cottonmouth is dangerous, and it could be fatal, and medical treatment is really need to be sought. Now, have we personally here seen any deaths? Very rarely do we see deaths related to snake bites. However, it is always good to get medical evaluation, and each situation is different with how much venom could be injected, if any, or more than normal, and could be concentrated. So similar species of the cottonmouth here, of the other species of non-venomous semi-aquatic snakes found in Missouri, can actually be harmless. So a good way, I think, even some of the tricky ones to see when they're in the water is you can mistake a water snake for a copper or a cottonmouth. So you have to be real cautious. And again, it's really just good to stay away. The other thing is too to remember all these snakes are protected by law. So it isn't that you should intentionally kill them. They actually, as Amanda mentioned earlier, they do some good with keeping rodent populations down, and they are around and they're in our ecosystem for a reason. So where do we find this northern coppermouth? Well, oddly enough, it's in the southeastern corner of Missouri, and it has scattered populations, though mostly around the Ozarks. But again, we really don't see these north of the Missouri River in our state. All right, a medium-sized rattlesnake, about 18 to 30 inches, is going to be our prairie Massasauga. Its general color is really, as you see here, kind of a light to dark gray or gray-brown color. And it really has like blotches looking on it with alternating black and alternating rows of smaller dark spots on the sides. Again, this one, its head is noticeably wider than the neck, and it's usually one of the more mild-mannered rattlesnakes, and it's hesitant to really strike unless it's harassed. And again, I talk about harassment and bothering snakes is we need to stay away. In our call center, what we see a lot of times, it's more often, unfortunately, men, boys who are going after and thinking it's cool to pick up a snake or taunting it. And we really just need to leave snakes alone and not pick them up and just let them be. So when approached, the Massasauga can usually remain motionless to avoid detection. And again, it can hide in its area to seek shelter, or it goes into a real thick vegetation, or it can go down into the crawfish burrows to hide to get away from being harassed or having any kind of problem from a predator. It's found in isolated populations, kind of the north central counties and in the northwestern corner of our state. All right, the timber rattlesnake. This is going to be actually Missouri's largest venomous snake. It's like 3 to 5 feet long. It's very heavy bodied, and it has a very prominent rattle at the end of its tail. The tail is black and often described as velvet-tailed. Now, this snake, like many others, uses camouflage to avoid being seen, as you can see here with the leaves and the area it's in. However, it too will bite if harassed. The rattlesnakes typically vibrate their tails, and it gives like a sharp buzzing sound when alarmed. But unfortunately, we cannot rely on that for identification. And the reason being is the snake's tails can either be injured, sometimes they're cut off, or often, like when we're hiking, we surprise the snake, and a surprised snake may not have time to sound its rattle. So this is found formerly statewide, but now it's kind of been eliminated from several counties. Now mostly the prairie regions in the southwestern and northwestern corners, as well as in the lowlands of the southeastern part of Missouri. All right, now we have the western pygmy rattlesnake. And with this, what we're looking at is really the color of it here. It's smaller, it's colorful, and it has a real slender tail and tiny rattle. This is one of the smallest species of rattlesnakes in Northern America. It only gets 15 to 20 inches long. In general, its color is kind of this brownish gray, and it has small dark brown or black blotches, as you can see there, throughout the length of the body. Again, the head has a distinct black stripe that angles from the eye to the corner of the mouth. You can kind of see that. Sometimes these snakes will try to defend themselves. Usually they remain motionless and try to escape. Now, the sound of the vibrating rattle is in this one is going to be a faint buzz, more like a grasshopper sound, and it can only be heard from a yard away. So this is when our tips when hiking that we'll get into, that you have to be cautious where you're walking. Where we're going to find this snake is in our southern Missouri border with Arkansas and in the eastern Missouri Ozarks and St. Francis Mountains.
All right. Thank you very much, Julie, for talking us through our 5 venomous snakes. We're going to talk now just about some do's and don'ts of snake bites. So if you are bitten or near someone that's bitten, there are plenty of things that we should and shouldn't do with snakes. I like to say that anything you've probably seen in a movie is not something you should do for a snake bite. And so for that, we don't actually use ice or submerge it in ice water. That's kind of surprising because we think injury and swelling. We often use ice to help with that, but that can concentrate the venom in the tissue and cause some increased issues. We also don't cut over the fangs or make any marks on the fang area or even suction the venom. People have in the past used their mouth to suck out the venom, or even little pumps and devices that are still manufactured out there. And those are not recommended for our Missouri snakes. It can actually cause as well some tissue damage. And just like I said, this is also sometimes done, but we do not apply any tourniquet or ACE wrap or any, tight bandage around the site. And that again is for constriction and tissue perfusion. So all these are the do nots. So none of those things that we see in the movie are things we should do. So let's talk a couple more, and then we'll talk the do's of snake bites. Surprisingly enough, we have to say it, but don't put any electrical shock on the bite. Do not attempt to capture or kill the snake, as you can re-injure yourself or someone else, as Julie mentioned earlier. And some of the do's are making sure that you remove any tight clothing and jewelry. So for example, if I was bit on the hand, I would remove my rings and my bracelets, etc. And that constriction really is something we want to prevent. It also will probably end up getting stuck on that limb if it was left on there. You want to immobilize the limb, meaning keep it calm and restful. Keep the bite slightly elevated or elevated several inches above the heart level. And that is really, again, for swelling and tissue perfusion. So you really want to just make sure that the person remains as calm as they can, removing that tight restrictive clothing or jewelry, and elevate the limb. We, of course, treat it like a wound. It is a wound and can have the potential for infection. So we wash it with soap and water to minimize that risk, and then remain calm. If the person's not having any symptoms or minor symptoms, it's best to call the Poison Helpline, where we work here at the Missouri Poison Center at 1-800-222-1222. If the person is having severe symptoms or is really affected, of course, 911 is always appropriate as well. And so some of the preventative things you can do if you're out hiking or enjoying nature is to carry a walking stick in tall grass and weeds, and kind of use that as something to kind of poke in front of you to make sure that you're stepping appropriately, not stepping into something. And that's especially true like in marshy areas or bluffs or areas that are sort of dimly lit. Use a flashlight at night, and wear those long pants and closed-toed shoes outdoors, especially any thick leather, rubber boots, taller ankle boots especially. It is helpful, of course, to kind of reduce the risk of a bite if you have those kind of footwear on. And do not even handle a snake even if you think it's dead. There is still a risk of a bite if it was newly died. Bring a buddy and a cell phone. It's always important to have those for any emergency, but it is even more important when we're talking snakes. And then make sure that you look before you reach or touch. That can be something like reaching into a wood pile or an area where there's a lot of brush, to make sure you just take a peek, because those are areas that are especially prone to having snakes. And then just kind of learn more about snakes. The more you learn, the less scared you may be, as well as the more prevention you can have for you or your family in identifying the snake. All right. Well, I appreciate that you spent this time with us learning about snakes here in Missouri. I want to encourage you to save the poison helpline in your phone today, and that number is 1 800 222 1222. We are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for any poison related question or an emergency, with specially trained nurses and pharmacists who can help you anytime. And thank you, Julie, for joining me today and sharing your information. And we appreciate your time.
Thanks, Amanda. And really, everybody, please remember, don't try to handle those snakes, and keep our number handy. It's one of the best ways. Just even if you have a question, don't forget to call that number.
All right. Thank you.